The silence of the auction barn fractured beneath cruel laughter. Beneath harsh lights and flaking metal beams, an emaciated German shepherd cowered in a rusted cage. His fur matted his ribs' sharp outlines, beneath a coat that once gleamed with discipline. Amber eyes, once keen and precise on Afghan battlefields, now stared into concrete, vacant and unreachable. Final lot of the day, the auctioneer barked, barely hiding his distaste. Military dog, no papers, behavioral issues. The starting bid, $50, was met with jeers and mocking shouts. Wouldn't pay a dime for damaged goods. Probably bite the hand that feeds it. The words landed like lashes, but the dog didn't flinch. He didn't move at all. From the back row, a metal chair scraped the concrete floor. A small figure stood, a boy no more than 9, with shoulders squared and eyes burning with something far older than his years. He raised a paddle, the number 17 drawn in black marker. "I'll take him," he said. His voice, high but unwavering, silenced the room. The boy's name was Tommy Collins, and in the 3 years since a car crash stole his parents, he had barely spoken a dozen words. The silence had settled around him like armor. Now, with $200 saved in crumpled bills and coins, he claimed a creature just as abandoned as himself. His grandfather retired. Marine Sergeant Major James Collins stood beside him, eyes shadowed with memory and war. One sleeve of his shirt hung empty, pinned at the shoulder. He said nothing, but when the vet warned of trauma, refusal to eat, and aggression, he nodded. "We'll take him." The cage door remained open. The dog, called Scrap by the county as if he were nothing more than junk, lay still. Tommy sat cross-legged outside the pen, voice gentle. "My name's Tommy. That's Grandpa James. We've got trees and quiet. No loud noises." He spoke until the light faded, and the workers swept up sawdust around him. And slowly, something shifted. The shepherd lifted his head. Amber eyes met Tommy's for the first time. "He just needed to know we weren't leaving him," the boy whispered. With stiff limbs and silent dignity, the dog stood. He crossed the threshold of the cage, not forced, not pulled, chosen. "His name is Atlas," Tommy said, certain as sunrise. Getting Atlas into the truck wasn't easy. He balked at the open door, legs locked, teeth bared, not in attack, but in fear, disguised as threat. Dr. Martinez, the county vet, offered sedation. James Collins refused. "He needs choice, not chemicals." Tommy crouched on the ground again. "We've got a big porch," he said, his voice steady. "You don't have to come. But it's warm, and I saved you some beef jerky." He didn't plead. He didn't push. He simply waited. So did Collins, standing tall beside the truck, a silent sentry guarding both boy and beast. 2 hours passed. Atlas didn't move. Then a step. Careful. Another. His amber gaze flicked from Tommy to the door. With the wary grace of an old soldier, he climbed in. The drive home passed in reverent silence. No music, no chatter, just the rumble of tires and the quiet pulse of something new, fragile, but real. At the farmhouse on the edge of Riverside, Oregon, Collins led Atlas to the covered porch. He had already laid out blankets and bowls. The shepherd sniffed once, then circled tightly, and lay down back to the wall, facing the yard. A sentinel, even in sleep. For a week, he refused the house. Tommy understood. He brought books to the porch, instead sitting cross-legged, just out of reach, reading aloud from the call of the wild. Each morning his voice grew stronger. Each afternoon, Atlas crept one step closer. By day 7, Collins watched from the kitchen as Tommy read under soft gray light. Atlas lay just 20 feet away, not near, but not far. That tactical distance spoke volumes. "I think he'll try the meadow today," Tommy said without looking up. He was right. Atlas stood. He moved stiffly scarred flank, catching the light. He paused at the steps. Wood, then gravel, then grass, testing every surface like a minefield. Then, without warning, he disappeared into the tall grass. Collins tensed. Was he running? But Tommy was calm. "He's not running," the boy said. "He's patrolling." And sure enough, the shepherd returned, head high, ears forward, gaze alert. He sat 10 feet from the porch, watching the boy, watching the road. He remembers Collins whispered, "Not just who he is, but what he's for." Night brought the hardest hours. That third week, a scream tore through the farmhouse, a child's scream raw and panicked. Collins moved instantly, instincts from years in combat snapping into place. He found Tommy thrashing in his sheets, caught in a nightmare he'd known too well. The boy's eyes were shut, tight fists, clenched, his voice rising in a wordless plea. Collins didn't touch him. He knew better. Instead, he stood near, offering a calm presence. "You're safe, son. You're home," he said softly. The sobbing came next, then the silent collapse into exhaustion. Then the softest sound, claws on wood. Atlas appeared at the doorway, his presence like a shadow and a shield. He hadn't entered the house at night, not once. But now he stepped into the boy's room, his gait cautious, but sure. He reached the bed, paused, and then with careful effort climbed up. He lay down against Tommy's feet, like a barrier against the dark. The change was instant. Tommy's breathing steadied, his fists relaxed. He reached slow and trembling to touch Atlas's ear. Atlas didn't flinch. "He knows," Tommy whispered into the dark. "He sees it too when he closes his eyes." From that night on, the house felt different. The porch remained Atlas's preferred post, but each dawn brought a new inch of progress. He began sleeping inside, first at the door, then at Tommy's side. When nightmares came, they never lasted long. Atlas was always there, a silent sentry against memory. Mornings became ritual. The dog conducted perimeter checks, every corner of the property methodically cleared before breakfast. Then he'd settle between Tommy's chair and the door, never intrusive, always watchful. Collins saw it in the way the boy moved now. Shoulders straighter, eyes less guarded. Tommy was speaking more at home, first about Atlas, then about other things. His voice, once a rare event, now came in full sentences, shaped by trust. One day, his teacher sent home a sketch. Atlas in precise lines and shading, standing in protective stance before Tommy. "It's the first thing he's completed without prompting," she said. Collins looked at the drawing. It wasn't art. It was truth. 6 weeks after the auction, Collins made a decision. Atlas needed a mission. They started with simple routines in the backyard. Sit, stay, come. Not as a pet, as a soldier. Collins reverted to his old command tone, crisp and clear. Atlas responded immediately, ears up, body-aligned movements sharp despite his healing wounds. It wasn't obedience. It was memory surfacing from beneath the trauma. He remembers Collins said after one perfect session, "It's still there, buried, but solid." Tommy, ever observant, noticed more. "He watches our hands more than our mouths," he said, "especially when planes fly over." And he was right. Aircraft triggered something in Atlas, a tension in his shoulders, a drop in focus. But hand signals grounded him. Tommy had found a language buried deeper than voice. And sits. Dr. Martinez began weekly visits. Her notes were amazed weight gain, muscle recovery, alertness, without aggression. But the most striking changes weren't medical. They were human. Tommy now left his bedroom door open at night. Atlas, uninvited, began curling at the foot of the bed. Nightmares came less frequently. When they did, Atlas simply pressed his body close, and the trembling would stop. The routines deepened. Atlas patrolled the yard each morning, then stationed himself in the kitchen subtly, between Tommy and any door. He wasn't anxious. He was back on duty. One afternoon, Collins found himself sitting on the porch, with Atlas beside him, the dog's warm flank brushing his leg. A familiar ache throbbed in his missing arm, a ghost pain he'd endured in silence for years. But this time, he didn't grit through it. He sat quiet as Atlas breathed beside him. Both of them wounded warriors carrying scars no one could see. That quiet companionship was its own kind of therapy. At school, Tommy's teacher noticed subtle shifts. He raised his hand sometimes, looked people in the eye. She didn't credit therapy or medication. It's Atlas, she told Collins. That dog didn't just change Tommy. He's anchoring him. By then, even the other children had begun to take notice. Is that the army dog they whispered at pickup time? The one who helps the quiet boy. Atlas didn't wear medals, but the way he stood beside Tommy spoke of valor. And for the first time in years, Tommy began planning for show and tell. The proposal began as a simple classroom talk. Tommy would explain what military working dogs did, how they helped, how they served. But beneath the surface, it meant more. It meant stepping in front of his peers. It meant speaking. Collins was cautious. He didn't want to push the boy, nor did he want Atlas exposed to another unfamiliar crowd without preparation. But the school principal herself, the sister of a veteran, was supportive. "We've got kids here with deployed parents," she said. "Atlas could help them in ways words can't." So they trained. Every morning, Atlas practiced walking beside Tommy through crowded spaces. At first, the dog trembled in the truck bed, panting, pacing. But Collins had built a modified harness. Tactical, secure, respectful. Atlas wore it like armor, he remembered. Their first test came at the farm supply store. "Stay close," Collins told them both. "Any stress, we leave." Atlas walked perfectly at Tommy's side. Not a pet, an escort. When a clerk approached too quickly, Atlas shifted subtly, creating space between the boy and the stranger. No growling, just presence. "Military dog?" the clerk asked, keeping a respectful distance. "Retired," Collins answered. 3 tours in Afghanistan." The man straightened. "Appreciate your service, Sergeant." His gaze flicked to Atlas and softened. "Yours too." It was a small thing, but Atlas heard it, felt it, and for the first time his body relaxed in a public place. Tommy said it plainly as they drove home. He remembers who he is, not just what happened to him. A few days later, they arrived at the American Legion Hall, Dr. Martinez's idea. A small group met weekly there, veterans and retired working dogs. At first, Collins resisted. He avoided crowds, didn't like the empty thanks or the awkward silences. But Tommy had said he needs to see other dogs like him, and you need to see their people. So they went. Inside, 5 other dogs roamed freely, German Shepherds, a Belgian Malinois, a lab with gray around his muzzle. The moment Atlas stepped inside, something changed. He didn't challenge. He didn't cower. He slotted in, watching the room, scanning exits, dividing surveillance zones with the others, like they were back on patrol. Muscle memory, training, a sense of belonging. And Collins, watching from the corner, felt something stir in his chest he hadn't known was still there. Hope. That night at the Legion Hall, Collins met Mike Donnelly, a Vietnam-era K-9 handler who'd seen the worst of war and still carried its weight in his shoulders. "That's not just any shepherd," Donnelly said, eyeing Atlas's build. "That's working dog lineage. They don't end up in auctions unless someone messes with protocol." Collins nodded. "We think he was diverted. No proper discharge. No adoption process. Just dumped." Donnelly's jaw tightened. "That's not a mistake. That's a cover-up." Before Collins could ask more, Marcus Williams approached the organizer, a veteran missing a leg, his presence steady and unintrusive. He greeted Atlas with a nod, crouching, without looming. He addressed Tommy with respect, no condescension. That alone won Collins over. As the meeting unfolded, the veterans watched in quiet awe as Atlas integrated into the group. No barking, no dominance, just smooth, silent coordination. Patrol instincts activating, zones covered, eyes everywhere. "He's still operational," Williams murmured. "It's all there. The trauma buried it, but the structure still intact." Toward the end of the meeting, Donnelly offered something unexpected. "We've got an upcoming event for deployed families. Could use a security assessment, entry points, crowd management. Atlas's skill set fits. Wouldn't just be rehab, it'd be contribution." Collins hesitated. He'd thought of giving Atlas tasks, but this would mean stepping back into the world, into responsibility, exposure. But then he looked at Tommy, sitting tall, with one hand resting gently on Atlas's shoulder. The boy had grown stronger with every passing week, not through protection, but through purpose. "We'll consider it," Collins said. And for the first time, he meant it. Before they left, Williams offered one final observation. "You know what separates the vets who fall apart and the ones who find peace." Collins waited. "Mission," Williams said. "Purpose outweighs trauma. Every time." Back home, Tommy practiced his school presentation with quiet intensity. Charts, pictures, a speech about what military working dogs do and what they give. The school approved a visit. Atlas would attend under strict protocol. But the night before, a letter arrived in the mailbox. A cold sheet of bureaucratic paper from the Department of Defense. It labeled Atlas as property, unlawfully acquired, and demanded inspection. Collins stared at the letter, pulse steady, eyes hard. "They're not just looking," he muttered. "They're coming." The next morning, a black sedan appeared at the end of the gravel road, too clean, too still. Collins saw it instantly for what it was. Surveillance. Not local, not casual. "Change of plans," he told Tommy. "Dr. Martinez will take you and Atlas to school. I have errands." He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. His first stop was the county records office. The clerk, a retired Army admin, recognized his expression, the grim face of a man chasing ghosts through paperwork. She granted access to the impound records for Atlas. Within minutes, the inconsistencies screamed from the page. The transfer authorization didn't come from the military K-9 program. It came from Harrison Security International, a private contractor. And the receiving facility, it didn't exist. Collins took photos, then drove straight to the local paper. Jack Patterson. The editor listened in silence as Collins laid out the findings. Military dogs sold to contractors and ending up in public auctions. He didn't need to say more. The story had legs. Back at school, Tommy gave his presentation. Atlas sat beside him, poised and steady. When the bell rang, he didn't even flinch. The boy, who'd once gone days without speaking, now talked for 15 minutes straight about war, about dogs, about healing. That night, Collins noticed the same sedan parked in the school lot. "They've seen us now," he muttered. "We're not ghosts anymore." Later, Donnelly arrived at the farmhouse, eyes dark with anger. "I called in favors." Atlas's unit was decommissioned 18 months ago. All dogs were marked for retirement, but 6 went missing. "Let me guess," Collins said. "Transferred to Harrison." Unofficially, Donnelly replied. "Used for experimentation. Conditioning techniques banned under U.S. regulations." Collins didn't respond. He didn't have to. That night, he sat at the kitchen table cleaning his old service pistol. Not with anger, with clarity. Purpose had returned to his life, not just in protecting Atlas, but in fighting for justice. The next morning, 2 men in suits arrived in a black SUV. Government plates. They didn't enter unannounced. They waited. Tactical courtesy. Sergeant Major Collins once said, "We're here about a military asset in your possession." "You mean Atlas?" Collins replied from the porch. "No," the man corrected. "We mean tactical K9 asset, K9821307. And just like that, the battle became official. Collins stood firm on the porch sleeve, pinned neatly at the shoulder, voice calm, but steel hard. "I adopted Sergeant Atlas from a county auction after your systems abandoned him." The agents didn't flinch. "We're conducting a standard inventory check. The Department of Defense retains ownership of military assets until formal discharge." "You mean this dog," Collins said, "who suffered physical abuse, trauma, and a redacted service record. This dog you discarded, then tried to reclaim when he started to heal." Behind him, the screen door creaked. Tommy appeared, hand resting gently on Atlas's neck. The shepherd stood alert, but still, every muscle disciplined, eyes tracking threats, posture controlled. There was no aggression, only presence. The younger agent glanced at his file. "He appears remarkably stable." "He's not an asset," Tommy said, voice unwavering. "He's a veteran, like my grandpa." For a moment, silence reigned. The agent, so used to protocol, to resistance, to rehearsed outrage, stood quiet. Then Collins spoke. "Unless you've got a court order authorizing the seizure of a decorated military service member, this conversation is over." Foster, the senior agent, didn't argue, just tapped his phone as he turned back to the SUV. "Subject is non-compliant. Proceed with legal measures." Collins didn't watch them drive away. He watched Tommy. The boy's face was steady, but his hand trembled slightly on Atlas's shoulder. He'd stood tall, but he knew the storm was coming. "They'll be back, won't they?" Tommy asked. Collins didn't sugarcoat it. "Yes, but we'll be ready." 3 days later, Atlas collapsed. During his morning patrol, he dropped without warning, panting and trembling. Foam lined his mouth. His powerful frame lay limp in the grass. Collins ran to him. Tommy's voice cracked in panic. He was checking the fence line. Then he just fell. Dr. Martinez met them at the clinic. Her face darkened as she examined the dog. "Liver and kidneys are in distress. This isn't infection, it's toxicity." "Poison?" Collins asked. "Not standard. This looks like exposure to industrial-grade compounds. Not something he found on your farm." Then Collins remembered. The contractor, Harrison Security, experimental conditioning, banned substances. "He's detoxing," the vet said. "The trauma buried the chemicals. Now that he's healing, they're releasing. Tommy's voice came like a prayer. Can you save him? Dr. Martinez's answer was cautious. We'll try. But he needs advanced toxicology at the University Hospital in Portland. This level of care will be expensive. Do everything necessary, Collins said, without hesitation. Tommy sat in the waiting room frozen. His voice once found, now gone again. The silence returned deeper than before. Atlas was transferred stabilized and rushed into aggressive treatment dialysis, anti-seizure medication organ support. The diagnosis was grim experimental compounds designed to suppress fear and heighten aggression hidden in fatty tissues, now flooding his bloodstream. He's fighting, the specialist said. His condition with you gave him a chance. Without it, he wouldn't have made it this far. But it wasn't just the body under siege. Tommy shut down. The boy who once read aloud every morning, who stood in defense of his dog at a school assembly, now stared at nothing. His hands clenched in his lap. No sound, no tears, just absence. Word spread fast. Dr. Martinez called Marcus Williams. He activated the veteran network. By nightfall, the waiting room was full. Veterans, teachers, parents, even children from the military support group Atlas had helped. Mike Donnelly arrived with his elderly bomb-sniffing lab sergeant major, who lay his muzzle on Tommy's knee, without a sound. The principal brought handmade cards from Tommy's classmates, drawings of Atlas messages in crayon. Get well soon, hero. Thank you for protecting us. But it was the arrival of Jack Patterson and Alan Westfield that changed the tide. Westfield, a legal advocate for military service animals, carried authority in every clipped word. Since 2016, under Robbie's law amendment, military working dogs have protected status. What happened to Atlas wasn't just cruel, it was illegal. We've filed an injunction, he added. And my foundation will cover the cost of care. Tommy didn't respond, but his shoulders dropped just slightly, the tension easing as the adults began to speak not of endings, but of fight. The next morning's paper bore a bold headline, War Hero Dog, Fighting for Life After Government Abandonment. Beneath it, Atlas's photograph, beside a small boy in a denim jacket, hand resting on his shoulder. The nation read, and the nation reacted. The headline exploded across social media. Justice for Atlas, trended by noon. News outlets picked up the story, citing the paper's reporting, Dr. Martinez's diagnosis, and Tommy's quiet defiance. Veterans groups issued statements of outrage. Donations flooded the hospital. At Tommy's school, a fundraiser surpassed its goal tenfold. Cards, treats, letters, prayers, they arrived by the hour. Even Harold Mercer, the gruff neighbor who once called Atlas a threat, came to the hospital with a basket of dog biscuits and supplements. My brother served in Desert Storm, he said awkwardly. If they'd done this to his K-9 partner, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. By the third day, the news turned. The vet team issued a cautious statement. His values are stabilizing. He's still critical, but he's fighting. Collins stepped outside for air and found a crowd had gathered. Veterans in uniform stood at attention. Children held handmade signs. Families with dogs stood in quiet vigil. No one spoke loudly. No one made demands. They were simply there. Not for show, for Atlas. Inside, Tommy hadn't spoken since the collapse. But now beside the hospital bed, he whispered, You're not alone, Sergeant. We've got your six. It was faint but real. Later that evening, Westfield approached Collins again. If Atlas pulls through, we want to present his case before Congress. This can't happen again. Not to any service dog. Not to any veteran. Collins nodded. He wasn't a man who trusted bureaucracy, but he trusted the clarity of battle, and he knew they were in one now. Atlas opened his eyes that night. Just a flicker. Just enough. Tommy saw it, and for the first time in days, he smiled. The community had become a unit, linked not by proximity, but by shared cause. A boy without words, a dog without a future, a town that chose to believe in both. And Collins, watching it all unfold, realized what he'd found again, something he hadn't known he'd lost. Not just mission, but faith. 3 weeks later, Atlas stood again, shaky slow, but standing. His fur had thinned in patches. His muscles, though returning, bore the wear of the fight. But when Tommy entered the recovery room, Atlas rose. No bark, no whimper. He simply stood. Wordlessly, the boy crossed the room. He didn't run. He didn't cry. He laid a hand on the shepherd's shoulder, and the dog pressed his forehead gently to Tommy's chest. No words were needed. Meanwhile, the legal battle intensified. The Department of Defense filed formal papers asserting ownership over K9821307. Westfield's team filed counterclaims invoking Robbie's Law and the unlawful bypass of discharge protocols. A congressional inquiry was initiated after Patterson's follow-up expose reached Capitol Hill. National broadcasts picked up the story, the war dog who was thrown away. Boy defends veteran dog from his own government. Atlas became more than a headline. He became a symbol. Meanwhile, Collins and Tommy returned to the Legion Hall. Veterans greeted them not with ceremony, but with respect. "You brought the fight home," Marcus Williams said. "For all of us." Atlas resumed his community role in small ways. A perimeter check at the school, a presence during family support group meetings. Always calm, always steady. The children who once cried at goodbyes now stayed to pet his fur. The American Legion created the Atlas Fund, a program to support the rehabilitation of military dogs and veterans alike. Then came the ceremony. Congressional staff veterans, school officials, and families gathered in Riverside. No pomp, just quiet reverence. Atlas vest, freshly cleaned, sat beside Tommy as the congressman approached with a medal, not for combat, but for courage in recovery. And beside them, Collins stood, shoulders squared, sleeve pinned neatly. In the crowd, Harold Mercer stood near the principal. Jack Patterson held his camera low. Mike Donnelly saluted. Atlas didn't bark. He didn't react when applause broke out. But when Tommy leaned down and whispered, "You're home," the shepherd exhaled a long, deep breath that emptied years of weight. And in that quiet, something unspoken passed between boy dog and town. A truth no paper could print. Healing doesn't start with a cure. It starts with someone saying, "I see you. I won't leave." The hearing came 2 months later. Washington, D.C. Not the battlefield Collins knew, but the stakes felt just as high. Atlas sat quietly by Tommy's side, in the courtroom, tail curled, neatly ears twitching at every sudden sound. Cameras flashed, officials whispered, but neither boy nor dog flinched. Collins gave testimony. Dr. Martinez provided medical records. Westfield laid out the violations of military protocol, of federal law, of basic decency. Then Tommy stood. No one asked him to. No one expected it. He stepped to the microphone, his small hand brushing Atlas's fur. "He was forgotten," Tommy said, voice quiet but clear. "Like I was. But we didn't stay broken. We remembered each other. That was all. It was enough." The ruling came 2 weeks later. Atlas would remain in Tommy's custody. A full discharge was issued with honors. Harrison Security International faced federal investigation. The K-9 Working Dog Program initiated reforms. Legislation was drafted in Atlas's name to close the loopholes that nearly cost him his life. Back in Riverside, life returned to rhythm. Not as it was, but as it could be. Tommy spoke freely now, at home, at school, to strangers, about Atlas, about trust. He still had bad dreams. So did Collins. Some wounds never fully close, but every night Atlas curled at the foot of Tommy's bed. Every morning he did his patrol. Every afternoon he waited by the school gate, tail still, eyes sharp. Not because he had to, because he chose to. The town had changed, too. What once divided veteran and civilian now blurred, softened by the realization that courage wears many faces: a quiet child, a wounded soldier, a dog left to die, and above all, the love that says, you are not what broke you. You are what you chose to protect. In the golden light of late summer, Tommy and Atlas walked together across the field behind the farmhouse. No leash, no commands, just a boy and his dog, and a silence that this time meant peace.